Hello to all my friends at Project Go and See. This is John from Michigan Wild. I'm out driving in the area near my home on a very cold winter's day in early February, and it is about 15 or 16 degrees outside. And I wanted to mention how obsessive this and exciting this activity is. I find myself every day driving. I have a long commute to work, and it's very difficult to keep my eyes on the road. I'm always wanting to peer off into the woods, notice little hints here and there that I want to follow up on. It's a passionate and totally enjoyable pursuit. So it's frustrating when I finally do get a few hours to get outside, that it's bitterly cold with the wind blowing, but I'm gonna go anyway. And it makes me think about how fun this mystery is, and it makes me wonder someday when this becomes accepted fact. I've experienced enough and viewed enough and have had direct experiences to know without a doubt that Sasquatch is real, Sasquatch are widespread, and they're biological reality. And eventually, when they're an accepted fact, I wonder whether this period in history will be lost for future people. Would it be as fun and exciting and mysterious to go out and observe and study if everyone accepted the fact that they exist? So on a rare few hours in the wintertime here in Michigan, it gets dark so early that it's pretty frustrating. In December and January, by the time I get home, it's already dark. So I happen to be able to work from home today, and it's late afternoon on Friday, and I put in enough of a work day, enough of a work week that I'm going to reward myself with a couple hours poking around in the woods, even if I come away half frozen to death. So to all of you out there who share in this passion and brave the elements and injury, I'll mention that actually poking around one evening after work, when I was still in my work shoes that aren't appropriate for walking around in the woods, I actually slipped on a wet log and ended up, my doctor sent me to the emergency room a couple of days later because of my symptoms, and as it turns out, I had a concussion. They gave me a CAT scan, and so as one of the hazards, I climbed up on a log because I was hearing some noise in the distance, and I wanted a better vantage point over some brush that was immediately in front of me. Climbed up on this log. Sure enough, it was a little slimy, a little slippery, and I lost my footing and fell, and I had the impression that I had just fallen on my back, but I had no sense that I had hit my head, and I didn't black out. But then for the next 2 days, it was blinding headaches and typical concussions and symptoms, which I just thought was a bad sinus headache. But in the end, when I finally went to the doctor, she was pretty alarmed and so sent me off to the hospital. But anyway, I'm much better now. But to all of you out there who brave the weather and the elements and bugs and briars and swampy marshes to pursue this mystery with me, here's to you for your commitment and your passion. It is so very much fun. My first find after entering the woods, only a short distance from where I parked, was this little structure built around the base of a tree that had either fallen over or been pushed over. It appears that it's been there for a while with the leaves on top, although I guess they could have been placed there. And this is quite small, only coming up to the apex is probably waist high. And these structures being so small makes you wonder if they're built just to decorate the end of that log or whether it's actually meant for something to go in. But I can't escape the fact that usually they have these openings where it appears that something's meant to go in there. This area that I was exploring is about 2 miles from my home and from our group's home base. And my objective was to explore the western edge along a road in an area where we have found teepees and arches and many structures. On the ridge just above that first little structure, on a bank overlooking the road, but in an area where there's nowhere to pull to the side, it's around a curve, so cars just whiz by there, I found this strange structure. It had the appearance to me of a deliberate construction made from the tops of a tree that had blown over in a storm. It looks like the top branches had been very deliberately piled. I can't tell how much of a structure is underneath, except that there's an opening at both ends. And peering into that opening, I can see that it's stuffed with leaves and small branches on both ends. And as I walked around this, although I can't say I was overly fearful, just was aware that it looked, by its deliberate construction, it was easy to imagine that this could be a place to hole up from the cold in the wintertime. And it made me wonder as I was walking around, could they be lying in there under this? Just beyond the pile was the remnants of the tree that had blown over, and you could see where the branches had been taken off of this treetop and carried over to construct that pile. There were little green markers on the ground which seemed to have been there from before, some kind of survey, some kind of markers along the top of the ridge. It was a very cold day and the wind was blowing and my face was pretty covered up. And it wasn't until right before I left, when I was around the far side of it, that I realized that it had a very skunky, stinky smell. Moving south along the ridge, and then down to a hillside, I came to an area I had been watching for quite a while, along the side of the road where I could see arches and high leans, and looked like a lot of tree structures in that area. So I was happy to finally find a place to park and walk back down into this area to have a look. You notice that one right there is upside down with the bottom way up there in the air. And that splintered bent over tree back there doesn't have an obvious thing that bent it down. There is a fallen tree that went up the hill that way, and another set of them all in here laying this way, but they're not on top of that tree. So whatever caused that big splinter, that tree clearly didn't want to bend that way, and it was green and bent down like this. So I've come into an area with a series of leans. And this one over here in particular. You can see there's a Y in that tree up there, which must be what attracted the whole idea of leaning this here. And the reason why I say this is a deliberate lean is if you look at the bottom, this is clearly broken off from somewhere else. There's obviously no trunk from that tree, wherever it came from. That was brought here and placed up in that Y. Here's a nice little pinned arch. Complete with what I usually find, a little bundle of sticks at the top end to hold it down. All deliberately placed to there, and nothing large having fallen in this direction to pull that tree over. So here's kind of an interesting thing. So here we have an arch of quite a large tree, and it's got a branch leaning up against it over there. And you can see it's up against this tree. But the interesting part is if you see that lean and the side of the tree it's on, look on the opposite side of the tree. And this is what I see when there are leans up against trees for a long time. They rub the bark off. And so, judging by the angle of that, I would say that this tree has spent, there's very little rub off on this side. So it looks like it's only recently on that side. But it looks to me as if that tree used to be on the other side of this. and then something pushed it up and moved it to the other side. On my way back to the truck, as I was getting cold, I passed through an area where there was this old tree that had rotted and its tops had fallen down onto the ground. But I noticed that one of the tops appeared to have been picked back up and suspended along this trunk so that both ends were off the ground. So I'll finish out this video with a few quick views of some of the other structures, smaller things that I found along the way. I hope you've enjoyed this day out with me in the cold woods. Take care. Talk to you soon.